Hello everyone. In this video of digital photography lessons for beginners, lesson number 3, we're going to talk about the exposure triangle. What are the exposure triangle components? ISO, aperture and shutter speed, what each of them means, and how to set them on your camera to find the right balance among the 3 of them. But before we kick off, I'd like to remind you that this is my 3rd day in my YouTube 21 days posting challenge. I need your support, guys, because it's quite a lot of work to do, and you can support me by watching my videos and subscribing to my channel and activating the notification bell. This is Iyad from Zero to Hero Photography, and let's get started. It can be scary sometimes for people when they hear about the exposure triangle and how to set the settings for each component of its components. It can be challenging, but if we understand the concept behind each one of them, it can be really easy. The components are ISO, aperture and shutter speed. If we manage to find the right balance between the 3 of them, we can get nice photos that are sharp and well lit. Let's start now with the ISO. ISO is the sensitivity of the camera towards the light. The higher the ISO the number, the more sensitive the camera to the light, which means it will try to absorb more light into the sensor. The lower the ISO number, the less sensitive the camera to the light. It's good to use an ISO of 100 on our cameras when it's daytime, because we have enough lights. Between 100 and 200. But if we want to have some shooting during the night time, we can increase it up to 400, 800. But more than that, and if the ISO number was high, the camera will be super sensitive. Not only it will grasp more light and the photo will be brighter, but there will be a lot of noise in the photo. Let me show you how to fix the ISO on your camera. First of all, we need to turn on the camera. It's turning on. And we need to put it on manual shooting mode. So I'm gonna change. See, I'm changing TV, AV, M manual. As you can see here, the ISO is set on 200. Now this ISO is the first step that you change in the manual. You need to test your camera and see how you can change it. And I set it on 200 previously, but now I'm gonna try and change it to 100, for example, if it's daytime. If it's nighttime, as we said, you can go up to, use 400 up to 800. In my camera, if I go beyond 800, I start seeing some noise in my photos. So I don't think I can go beyond 800. A lot of cameras has the same. So test your camera and see the limits on how much further you can go. But if it's daytime, always make sure it's at 200 or 100 and you have sufficient light. Now, when you saw how you can change the ISO on your camera, I'd like to remind you that you can change the 3 components or find the right balance between them if you are on the manual mode. There are some other modes in the camera that control some elements of this triangle and let you change 2 other elements. We'll talk about them in future videos, and I'll keep a link up there for my other video that I talked with some examples about these ones. Let's get back to our points. And the ISO, by the way, is a good starting point for any photo. Before you play around the other components, fix the ISO first and then move on to the aperture or shutter speed. The second component of the exposure triangle is the aperture. The aperture is the opening of the lens. The bigger the opening of the lens, the more light comes in. And the smaller the opening of the lens, the less light comes in, and thus the photo will be darker. It depends on the shooting situation. If it's daytime, we need to have smaller opening to have less light coming into the camera to avoid any overexposed photos. So this is the one aspect that the aperture controls, the amount of light. The other aspect that the aperture controls is the depth of field. Depth of field is the area around your subject. Look at me, for example. I am the subject of this frame, and everything around me is called, or is the negative space, or the space around me, can be the depth of field. I am on focus, and everything between me and the background is the depth, and you can see that it's slightly blurred. Sometimes it can be more blurred or less blurred depending on the aperture settings. If we have more opening of the lens, the background would be more blurred. If we have smaller opening of the lens, the background would be more sharp. It depends on what you want. It gives a nice dramatic effect if you are taking portraits and you want the subject just to stand up and separate it from the background. By the way, the aperture is referred to by numbers. Let me get into my camera and show you how to set the aperture and what the numbers mean. And now, after changing the ISO, we move on to the aperture. The aperture is the number next to the ISO. It says f4.0, which is the f-stops. This number can be changed to higher in my camera, but I can't go lower than that. I'll tell you why in a bit. But the higher I go, the closer the opening of the lens becomes, which means less light going into the camera. In other words, darker photo. But it will be sharp. That's why I can compensate on the shutter speed or the ISO to allow more light in the camera if the aperture is narrow, large number. So by the way, the larger the number is, the f-stop, the f number, the smaller the opening of the lens. And the smaller the number is, the larger the opening of the lens. In some cameras, in some lenses, the f-stop can go below 4 stops. For example, I have a 50mm lens that can go to 1.8, and in this one I can take nice photos with a blurred background, and even if it's nighttime, it will allow more light in and thus take brighter photos at night. The third aspect or component of the exposure triangle is the shutter speed. The shutter speed is the duration of time that the shutter of the camera closes and opens, allowing light to go into the camera to the sensor. The faster the shutter is, the faster the camera in capturing the photo, which means less light coming into the camera, but at the same time it will capture fast movement. If I'm moving my hand like this and we have fast shutter speed, then it will capture my hand in a sharp view. If the shutter speed is slow, then my hand will look a little bit blurry, and you'll see it shaky a little bit. It can be nice sometimes to give it some effect, but if you're capturing cars racing or some moving object, you want the shutter speed to be fast. But remember, the faster the shutter is, the darker the photo. That's why you will need to change the other aspects, which are the ISO and aperture. We'll talk about them more in details. Actually, I have a video that I have posted before with more examples on how to change these 3 aspects, and you can see more examples on how to do it. But let me show you now on the camera how to change the shutter speed. As for the shutter speed, it's represented by fractions of the second. As you see here, it's placed next to the aperture. It says 1/8, which means 1/8 of the second. And I can go up with the number to 1/10 of the second. Can you imagine how fast this is? And this one is 1/13 of the second. I can go up to 4,000 of the second. This is super fast. It can capture moving objects quickly. Imagine you're watching a football game and you want to take some pictures of the players, or some kids running, or your dog, or cars. This will allow you to take sharp photos even if they're moving. However, the photo will be very dark because you allowed a small part of light to go into the camera, because the shutter speed closes quickly and less light goes in. That's why try to test it up to 2000, 2500 and see if you can take it with enough light, or maybe less or more, but you can always compensate on the other aspects, the ISO and the aperture. If you want a brighter photo, you can go down with the number. The smaller the number, the slower the shutter speed and the more light comes in. This is nice if you want to create some nice effect or blurry effect for your subjects sometimes, or if you want to allow more light into the camera, especially when it becomes darker. If you can see here, we can go even up to one-fourth of a second. But lower than that becomes seconds. So this one, for example, says 3 seconds. The aperture will close within 3 seconds, which is long in the camera world. I can go even lower, see, up to, okay, 30 minutes. So the shutter speed would take 30 minutes to close. But it depends. If it's nighttime and you need to take the photos, you can go as low as these numbers. However, at this point, the camera will be sensitive to any movement. The photo will be blurred because the shutter speed is closing slowly. So any shaking or any movement of the camera will result in a blurred photo. That's why you need to use a tripod. Now that you know what the exposure triangle is and how to change the settings on your camera, all what we've talked about is changing the settings on the manual mode. And finally, I hope you find this quick tutorial helpful for you to manage any camera. By the way, if you don't have a camera and you'd like to try these ones on your mobile phone, there are some applications that allow you to change the settings of your mobile phone camera. I don't know any recommended ones right now. Once I do so, I'm gonna share a video about it. Please hit the like button if you like my video and cheer for me in my YouTube challenge of 21 days because tomorrow will be my 4th episode. This is Iyad from Zero to Hero Photography and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.